Hey, Mark.
Next one, the percentage of removal and the changes in the, I know you pointed to the time frame and lack of appeal. Do you see anything else, and if you sort of step back more broadly and give your assessment of what you see in relationship to, say, to the last decade in terms of removal of disciplines versus far more rigorous, and not just politics, playing to the.
If I'm stepping back fairly far, I would say I don't understand the focus on removing refugees when we don't remove people who overstay various other types of visas, given that we have, especially given that this often plays out as a kind of, we need to protect our capacity to control our borders, and one of the reasons we need to protect our capacity to control our borders relates to national security issues. Well, if we're concerned seriously about those issues, refugee claimants are not the people that are most troublesome. It's people about whom we have far less information, people who come in on tourist visas, on business visas, on student visas, right? And so why are we so focused on removing unsuccessful refugee claimants as opposed to various other groups? And I think it comes down to class issues. I think we're not too worried if students overstay their visas. We're not too worried if someone can demonstrate that they have sufficient wealth to get various types of business visas. We're not too worried if those folks stay here. We are worried if our refugee determination system becomes a backdoor for immigration. So from my perspective, I think we should think seriously about what our priorities are with respect to removals generally. I suspect that part of the reason we focus on refugee claimants is because they're the easiest targets. They're the easiest targets because they're the ones that we have the most information about. We know where they're living because we've got to send them our refugee determination. So it's just kind of administratively easy. So I would want to think about that. In terms of the changes, I frankly am not too worried about the pre-removal risk assessment process. I think the process was largely useless for most claimants anyway. So I'm not too worried about that, given the choice between a PRA and an appeal to the Refugee Appeal Division. I think the appeal is more significant. So I'm not too worried about that. I am worried about the fact you can't make an agency while your removal is pending. I think that's a problem.
One final question, or should we end?
Well,
Yeah, it's 2 o'clock. Okay, Steve.
I just wanted to quickly, 2 points with respect to the civil servant criteria now, where people who were appointed before, it was subject to public scrutiny, were they not, to some extent? And we had a sense of who they were, whereas people who were hired as civil servants, we're not going to know who they are. How are we going to be assured that the government is being considerate of the people that are hired, the background where they're coming from, the attitudes they're bringing forward, and what checks and balances that are in place to ensure that? And from a union, just lastly, from a union activist point of view, what can I do to encourage the government and raise awareness to people within my constituents and allies to ensure that there's transparency and fairness within this new policy?
I think that's a great question with respect to transparency in the staffing of the Refugee Protection Division, although right now we can get information about who Immigration and Refugee Board members are. You can get brief biographies. Sometimes it's a bit depressing, like Steve Gallagher just got an appointment recently, which shocked me. But so I think that's a concern. Again, it's going to be the issue is going to be how does IRB management respond? Because IRB management could take the position that these people are making important decisions, and just as we were making biographies of IRB members publicly available without having any obligation to do so, and we can do the same thing with respect to these staff members. If they don't do it, there are other procedures you can try. You can try access to info to get this kind of information. In the United States, there's a big study called Refugee Roulette, I'm sure a number of you have looked at, where they were able to get information about civil servants making decisions and interesting study about, does it make a difference whether you worked in the military previously, or you work for government, or you're an academic, or whatever. And then just in terms of what can be done, I think various civil society groups, including the Canadian Council for Refugees, need to be strategic about what the major asks are for possible changes. I think coordination with respect to what different community groups are asking for is a good idea. I think that there is a general consensus with respect to the timelines, that something needs to be done about that. I think there's a general consensus that a safe source country idea is potentially dangerous. And I think there's a consensus that the agency changes are problematic. The one that's trickiest there is safe source country, because you have people like Peter Shalvin who said maybe it's all right. But I do think that the timelines and agency are something that we should be kind of pushing for as a community.
Thank you both very much. Appreciate this, and I think what's at the center, we'll try to create more spaces over the next months, and I think Sean has an activity in the fall plan to further has places to discuss and debate, and maybe also people may want to get organized